It's 7 p.m. Tuesday, July 9th here in Seoul.
Coming up on NEWSCENTER tonight. South Korea's trade minister says Seoul and Tokyo will likely meet this Friday for a working-level consultation on Japan's export curbs against South Korea. Seoul, in the meantime, has introduced the issue as an emergency agenda to the WTO's Council for Trade in Goods.
President Moon Jae-in calls for public firms to take the lead in building a fair economy, one of the president's key policy goals.
Following weeks of mass protests, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam says the controversial bill that would have allowed extradition to the Chinese mainland is dead. Activists, however, argue that it falls short of an official withdrawal of the bill.
And despite a slowing market, Korean shipbuilders maintain the lead in the global order book, bringing in more than half of last month's orders. NEWSCENTER begins now.
Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to Arirang News Center. I'm Han-Dan in Seoul.
And I'm Noadan. Thank you as always for joining us this evening. Our top story, South Korea's trade minister says Seoul will likely hold talks with Tokyo this week over Japan's export restrictions on high-tech material shipments to Korea.
He once again urged Japan to lift the export curbs, announcing that Korea will take the matter to a panel meeting at the WTO that will take place in the coming hours. Arirang's chief economics correspondent Kim Hae-sung has our top story.
South Korea's trade minister said on Tuesday that South Korean and Japanese authorities are working to hold talks in Tokyo regarding Japan's restrictions on high-tech materials to Seoul.
The meeting is currently scheduled for Friday afternoon. We are working on the details of the participants and the agenda. We will continuously call for a removal of the export restrictions and see why Japan has imposed restrictions and clarify our stance.
The trade minister's repeated calls for Tokyo to lift the export restrictions come after Japan's curbs on high-tech materials, namely fluorine polyamide photoresist and etching gas, that are used to produce chips and display panels by South Korean companies went into effect last week. He added that the government is working closely with Korean companies and the international community by taking the matter to a panel meeting of the WTO Council for Trade in Goods in Geneva on Tuesday local time. Regarding Tokyo's allegations that Seoul shipped key industrial materials to North Korea that violated UN sanctions, Minister Song said,
"We have conducted investigations on local firms and found no evidence of the transfer of hydrogen fluoride imported from Japan to any UN-sanctioned country, including North Korea."
He said if Tokyo has evidence to support its allegations, it should share detailed information with Korea and related countries as a UN member. Meanwhile, Japan pushed back against calls from South Korea to lift the export curbs. Japan's industry minister Hiroshige Seko said at a news conference on Tuesday morning that he has no plans to withdraw the curbs and that they did not violate WTO rules. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
President Moon will be inviting a group of business leaders to the top office tomorrow to work on a strategy to respond to Japan's new export curbs. A total of 34 business leaders whose combined assets total nearly $8.5 billion or more will be gathering at the presidential office in the morning in the first meeting of its kind since January. The attendees will include most of the leaders of the big five conglomerates, Samsung, Hyundai Motor, SK, LG, and Lotte Group. The de facto heads of Samsung and Lotte Group, however, Lee Jae-yong and Shin Dong-bin, will not be at the meeting because they're in Japan working on the issue there. The focus of the meeting tomorrow is largely to get an understanding of the difficulties local businesses face and possibly to exchange views on necessary measures. Amid trade tensions between Seoul and Tokyo, the vice chairman of Samsung Electronics, Lee Jae-yong, has gone to Japan. Although the firm is tight-lipped about the details, Japanese news outlets are hinting about what Lee might be up to. Our Ko Ryun-hee reports.
Japan's Nihon Keizai Shimbun reported on Monday that Lee Jae-yong, the vice chairman of Samsung Electronics, expected to request Japanese executives to ship high-tech materials not from Japan, but from factories overseas to avoid trade restrictions. Lee arrived in Japan on Sunday, and his trip comes after Tokyo's new export restrictions against Seoul on high-tech materials used for making chips and displays took effect last week. The Japanese newspaper said that Vice Chairman Lee's expected move is to minimize a negative impact on chip production, and added that Lee is likely to discuss other possible countermeasures with business partners in Japan. NHK also covered the news and mentioned South Korean President Moon Jae-in's meeting on Wednesday with heads of major corporations threatened by the export restrictions. Although Lee was expected to attend the meeting as well, industry sources say he's likely to stay longer in Japan, possibly until late this week. Citing sources familiar with the matter, All Nippon News Network reported Tuesday that Lee is planning to meet with executives from Japanese banks as well. Samsung Electronics did not provide the details of Lee's trip, and South Korean news outlets are reporting that everything is top secret, considering that firms are caught in the middle of diplomatic issue between Seoul and Tokyo. Analysts say Lee's quick move reflects how the restrictions will hurt Korean firms in the long run, citing Korea's dependence on chip material imports from Japan. One example is the case of photoresist, or light-sensitive materials that are used in chip manufacturing. During the first 5 months of this year, more than 90% of Korea's total imports of the material came from Japan. 고르니, Arirang News.
And staying with the issue, amid aggravating economic and diplomatic spat between South Korea and Japan over Tokyo's latest export restrictions on Seoul, a growing number of people in Korea are raising their voice to criticize Japan's retaliatory action. Our Yoon Jung-min has more.
College students have been staging one-man protests in front of the Japanese embassy and other sites, including offices of Japanese companies in Seoul, to criticize Tokyo's restrictions on exports to Seoul. These are seen as a means to retaliate against a ruling by Korea's top court that ordered Japanese companies like Nippon Steel to compensate Korean nationals who were forced into labor during Japan's colonial rule.
It has been 74 years since Korea was liberated from Japan, but it doesn't make sense that victims of Japan's forced labor and other atrocities still don't get an official apology. I believe every Korean citizen should take part in fixing this. Korea-Japan ties will improve only when the historical issues are settled.
Public sentiment in Korea is growing more negative toward the Abe administration, and an increasing number of people are criticizing Japan or boycotting their products to protest against Tokyo's tightening export restrictions for political reasons. On the other hand, there are those who would prefer more rational and calm strategies, as the anti-Japanese sentiment may harm the Korean economy as well.
What Japan has done is not good. It should not respond to historical issues with trade restrictions. Those should be dealt with separately.
People started a boycott of Japanese products, and they called for tourists to stop visiting Japan. But I think we should be more careful, especially in the long run.
Some experts say dialogue is imperative to fundamentally solve the trade issue, particularly to agree on a treaty aimed at the re-establishment of diplomatic ties signed between Seoul and Tokyo in 1965.
The two governments haven't reached a consensus in terms of the interpretation of Article 1 and 2 of the treaty they signed in 1965. The Korean government should discuss this with Japan to narrow their differences.
Not only politicians and business leaders, but more regular citizens are expected to raise their voice over the issue, depending on how the situation unfolds. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
In other news, a meeting was held at the Blue House today to assess how much has been achieved in building a fair economy during the first 2 years of the Moon administration. Presiding the meeting, President Moon emphasized that public institutions need to play a leading role in creating a fair market. Our Park Hee-jun tells us more.
President Moon Jae-in says public institutions should take the lead in building a fair economy, which is the foundation of innovative and inclusive economic growth.
공공기관의 공정거래는 우리 경제가 공정경제로 가는 출발점입니다. 시장의 신뢰를 세우는 일입니다. 길게 보면서 차근차근 추진해 나갈 수 있도록 모든 관계기관의 협력을 당부합니다.
At the third Fair Economy Strategy meeting at the Blue House Tuesday, the president, along with government organizations and public institutions, evaluated the progress made so far. A fair economy is one of the key economic pillars of the Moon administration, along with growth led by rising incomes and innovation. President Moon has been pushing for results that can make a difference in people's lives. He noted that previous governments fell short of expectations in creating a fair market, but said his government has taken a completely new approach.
과거처럼 일률적인 기준과 제재 위주의 방식이 아니라 사업의 특성을 고려하여 자율적으로 그리고 맞춤형으로 거래 관행을 개선하는 방식입니다.
As examples of what this method has achieved, the president pointed to how his government reformed unfair contracts that had only benefited public organizations. It has also fairly distributed profits and costs to public institutes and their subcontractors, while eradicating malpractices in which institutions and private companies made horizontal contracts. He said this paradigm will be applied to all public institutes and later to the private sector. And to make sure that firms benefit by following the rules, the president said this paradigm will be reflected in employee evaluations. The president also called for the swift passage of relevant bills that are sitting in Parliament. He said the legislative issue needs to be resolved in order to achieve more concrete results concerning the fair economy. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Assembly has kicked off a 3-day interpellation session. Some major topics were brought up on the first day today, including Japan's recent export retaliation, as well as the undetected North Korean fishing boat in South Korean waters. Kim Min-ji has the highlights.
Topping the agenda on the first day of the parliamentary Q&A session on Tuesday was Japan's new trade restrictions against South Korea. The opposition parties criticized the government for what they called an insufficient response, asking why it had not prepared measures in advance. The ruling party called for all-out efforts to resolve the problem and make sure it doesn't persist. Tokyo stepped up export controls on key materials to Seoul, used in semiconductor and display panels. The government said it has been preparing for all possible scenarios.
We are demanding the immediate lifting of the measures, and we have set up a task force that will look at ways to minimize the effect on local companies and see what is best in the mid to long term. We're also planning to file a complaint with the WTO.
Also on the table was a recent security lapse that allowed a North Korean fishing boat enter South Korean waters undetected. The opposition criticized the government for not noticing the boat and again called on the defense minister to step down, while the ruling party called for more training. The government reiterated there was no cover-up, but apologized again for the security lapse.
There are a lot of factors that led to the failure to detect it. I believe there was a lack of education and training. We also found that we need to bolster our system to improve coordination between the Army and maritime police.
There was also some back and forth between rival parties over the denuclearization drive on the Korean peninsula. The opposition stressed that what must be achieved is complete denuclearization, to which the ruling party and government said that is in fact the ultimate goal, and that the Moon Jae-in government has played an important role in reigniting the denuclearization talks between North Korea and the U.S.
It was President Moon Jae-in who created the conditions for the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. to restart dialogue. Depending on the situation, he sometimes plays the role of mediator or even steps out of the scene, and this has resulted in achievements.
2 more Q&A sessions are in store. Wednesday session will focus on economic issues, and likely to be at the center of debate again is Japan's recent export retaliation, as well as the government's multi-billion-dollar budget bill and its economic policies. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy, Lee Do-hoon, says he's hopeful that the denuclearization talks between North Korea and the US will resume in the coming weeks. Ahead of his trip to Germany, he told reporters that US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo mentioned that such working-level talks would come in that time frame. But he declined to comment on where the talks would take place, saying he thinks that's one of the issues being discussed between the two sides. He is scheduled to meet with his US counterpart, Stephen Biegun, in Germany this week, but there are said to be no plans of any meetings with North Korean officials there.
Several shifts in personnel and
A recent photo showing the North Korean leader's sister, Kim Jong-un, sitting close to her brother has raised speculation that she has jumped to the upper echelons of the regime. But Seoul's Unification Ministry says there could be other reasons for the seating arrangement. Oh Jung-hee reports.
The South Korean government is not yet concluding that Kim Jong-un has risen suddenly to a top spot in the North Korean state. On Monday, a memorial was held at Pyongyang Gymnasium to mark the 25th anniversary of the death of North Korea's founder Kim Il-sung, who was Kim Jong-un's grandfather. Here, another of the founder's grandchildren, Kim Yo-jong, was 4 seats to the left of her brother, sitting in the very front row. She was seated among 10 of the regime's most powerful people, including senior officials in the ruling Workers' Party, Park Bong-ju, Lee Man-gon, and Lee Soo-yong. This was seen by some as a sign that Kim Yo-jong is now North Korea's 9th most powerful herself.
She was seated among the vice chairman of the party's central committee, as well as its politicians, so it's possible that Kim Yo-jong's status has been raised from a candidate of the Politburo to an actual member.
But Seoul's Unification Ministry said Tuesday that it's too early to say for sure. An anonymous ministry official told reporters that there's no evidence from the past that North Korean officials' seating arrangements really match their status. He added that protocol changes depending on context, and Kim Yo-jong's seat might have been determined through some internal discussions. So, Kim Yo-jong might have been in that seat because she's Kim Il-sung's granddaughter. The view of the Unification Ministry is that Kim is still the first vice director of the Workers' Party's propaganda and agitation department. Still, it's understood that Kim Yo-jong does wield more power than she used to. Late last month, Lee Hae-hoon, the head of the Intelligence Committee at South Korea's National Assembly, told reporters that the National Intelligence Agency sees Kim Yo-jong as having higher status now. And her previous role, arranging events, has passed to the former pop star Hyun Song-wol. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea and the US have begun official discussions in Seoul at Washington's request about the treatment of American companies in Korea. Specifically, local media reports say it's about the tech company Qualcomm, which faces big fines here. But Korean government officials say it's not about any one company. The Trade Ministry in Seoul says the talks relate to the investigation procedures of Korea's Fair Trade Commission. Under the Korea-US FTA, the two sides are allowed to request official consultations with, but this is the first time it's happened. The National Assembly's Special Budget Committee has tentatively agreed to vote on the government's extra budget proposal next Friday. The $5.7 billion supplementary budget bill has been left untouched for over 2 months due to prolonged parliamentary standstill. Starting this week, the committee will question Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun and Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi over the bill, which will be followed by subcommittee deliberations next week. The ruling Democratic Party vowed to closely screen the budget so that taxpayers' money is not wasted, while the opposition parties have warned of major cuts. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Lee said the government will ask Parliament to draw up a portion of the budget bill to support local companies in the wake of Japan's trade retaliation. The President of Israel, Reuven Rivlin, will be making a 5-day state visit to Seoul this Sunday with the aim of upgrading bilateral ties. He will hold a summit with President Moon on Monday, where the two leaders will discuss ways to foster cooperation in high-tech sectors like software development. The top office said the pair will also discuss ties in future industries, as well as an FTA and people-to-people exchanges. Korean shipbuilders have won the most orders compared to other shipyards in other countries during the month of June. This comes amid falling global ship orders, and the secret behind Korea's success may be in its strategy in building mega container ships. Kim Ji-yeon explains.
Korea maintained the top spot in global shipbuilding orders for the second consecutive month in June. According to London-based Clarkson Research Services, the world's leading provider of data in the shipping and shipbuilding industries, Korean shipyards won orders totaling 340,000 compensated gross tons to build 6 ships in June. That's some 100,000 compensated gross tons more than that gained by China, which ranked second place. Japan ranked third with 90,000 compensated gross tons to build 5 ships. Korea's top ranking comes amid a dip in global ship orders, which fell by 41% on year last month. Local shipbuilders are trying to maintain their top position in the highly competitive global market by building mega container ships. One of the nation's major shipbuilders, Samsung Heavy Industries, said it set a new record for building the world's largest container ship. The company said the vessel, the first of 6 units ordered by Mediterranean Shipping Company, a Swiss shipper, left its shipyard on Saturday. The container vessel named MSC Golson is 400 meters long, 61.5 meters wide, and 33.2 meters high. The vessel is capable of carrying 23,756 containers, each measuring more than 6 meters long. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam has announced that the controversial bill that sparked weeks of protests in the territory is dead. But she did not go further on whether the legislation would be withdrawn as protesters have demanded. Our Kan Yong-woo has the latest.
Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam said on Tuesday that her administration's extradition bill that would have allowed people to be sent to the Chinese mainland for trial is dead.
But there are still lingering doubts about the government's sincerity or worries whether the government will restart the process in the Legislative Council. So I reiterate here, there is no such plan. The bill is dead.
During the press conference, Lam added that the government's efforts on the extradition bill had been a total failure. But the Hong Kong leader did not make it clear whether the controversial legislation was being withdrawn as protesters have demanded. Later on the same day, protesters held a presser of their own to express their distrust toward the current administration.
The extradition bill being put in the Legislative Council is a very legal, very formal legal proceeding. However, she only said that the bill is dead. We cannot find the word dead in any of the laws in Hong Kong or any legal proceedings in the Legislative Council.
Over the past few weeks, hundreds of thousands of demonstrators have taken to the streets of Hong Kong to protest against the extradition bill, expressing fears that Hong Kong is losing the freedoms that were guaranteed when the former British colony was returned to China in 1997. Kan Yong-woo, Arirang News.
The final lineup has been announced for this week's Major League Baseball All-Star Game. And South Korean pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin will be in the starting lineup Wednesday, only the second Asian player to earn that distinction. Our Lee Min-sun has the story.
South Korea's Ryu Hyun-jin has been selected as the starting pitcher for this week's Major League Baseball All-Star Game in Cleveland. At a press conference at Huntington Convention Center on Monday, Ryu said starting the All-Star Game is an honor for him and his family, and the day will be a special day for his home country. The pitcher also added that he came to America just to play baseball, but never imagined he would ever come this far when he first arrived in the U.S. The final lineup for the All-Star Game was officially announced at the press conference, but Ryu's Dodgers manager Dave Roberts, who will also serve as the National League manager, had already chosen Ryu to pitch the first inning. Roberts praised Ryu for his consistency and for being the best pitcher in the National League. Ryu leads the majors with a 1.73 ERA in 109 innings across 17 starts. He was also named the National League Pitcher of the Month in May. He will be the first South Korean player to start the All-Star Game and the second Asian pitcher to start the game. Ryu will face a team led by Boston Red Sox manager Alex Cora and Astros pitcher Justin Verlander on Wednesday morning in Cleveland. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Safety will always be the top priority at a major sporting event such as the upcoming World Aquatics Championships in Gwangju, which plans to accommodate more than 200,000 spectators from all corners of the world during the 17-day event. Our Won Jung-hwan at the main swimming stadium for us tonight to tell us more about how the organizers plan to keep everyone safe.
When it comes to safety, there are no prizes for second place. With less than 5 days until the 2019 FINA World Aquatics Championships, the organizers are working to make sure the event is safer and more secure than ever. On Tuesday, emergency drills were held at Nambu University Municipal Aquatics Center, the main venue of the 2019 FINA World Aquatics Championships, the first aquatics center in the country to adopt a state-of-the-art automated operating system to ensure the best water quality. It is known as one of the most user-friendly swimming facilities in Asia. Organizers have conducted drills to prepare for any type of safety or security incident that could happen during the global event, which begins this Friday. When the siren goes off at the stadium, firefighters guide volunteers and officials step by step so everyone can calmly and safely escape.
We've been conducting these kinds of emergency drills since early June, and this is our third time. Since most of the stadiums built for the championships are new and temporary, visitors and even staff are not familiar with the sites. That is why we are repeating the drills to increase our preparedness when needed.
After evacuating successfully from the stadium, volunteers were also taught how to perform CPR. And the counter-terror agency was also present to explain how they will conduct anti-terror drills near the sites to prepare in case of terror-related issues during the World Swimming Championships. To make sure every visitors from around the world are safe and secure, more than 2,500 police officers and firefighters will cover every site every day until the games end. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스, 광주.
South Korea's Culture Ministry and Tourism Organization will be accepting group tours to the new DMZ hiking trail in Korsang. Starting from the 23rd of this month, up to 40 people can apply for group bus tours to the Peace Trail. 2 hiking trails opened in Korsang and Cheolwon in Gangwon-do Province earlier this year, and the third is scheduled to open in Paju in September. South Korean climber Kim Jong-un, who lost all his fingers to frostbite nearly 30 years ago, has managed to reach the summit of 13 of the 14 mountains in the world that are higher than 8,000 meters. Kim reached the top of the world's 11th highest mountain, Gasherbrum 1, on Sunday. He plans to climb the final mountain by next year to become the world's first handicapped climber to conquer all 14 summits. BTS have set a new record with their latest single in Japan. The group's Japanese single, Lights, Boy With Love, topped the country's Oricon Weekly Singles chart for the first week of July. BTS sold some 620,000 units of the single, becoming the first foreign artist to sell over 600,000 units in the first week of release. An exhibition showcasing pre-Roman artifacts from central Italy is being held at the National Museum of Korea in Seoul for the first time. The exhibition is showcasing nearly 300 treasures, including sculptures, architectural ornaments and portraits, to give visitors a peek into the life and customs of the ancient civilization. The exhibition runs through October 27th. That has been your 3-minute news flash. It's now time to take a look at some of the digital media content available on Arirang's social media platforms.
And Unni News is back, taking a look at some top trending stories.
Hello everyone, I am finally back to Unni News after 2 months of break. I am Eun-kyung, a news reporter at Arirang TV. Here are today's Unni News. Controversy is raging over what should be done with dogs that attack people. In a horrific incident last month, a fox terrier attacked a 3-year-old girl, biting her inner thigh and dragging her several meters. It turns out the dog had a prior history of attacking its neighbors, and earlier this year, it bit the genitals of an 11-year-old boy, which nearly took his life. The controversy heated up another notch when famous dog trainer Kang Young-wook said,
못 키우게 해야죠. 강아지를 뺏어서 저분은 이제 개를 못 키우게 해야 되고, 그리고 또 저 친구는 아마 다른 사람이 키워도 또 문제가 발생할 가능성이 커요. 아마 안락사를 하는 게 옳을 겁니다.
Many dog lovers who are post euthanasia flocked to Kang's Instagram criticizing him. It appears the country is still in need of a lot of soul searching over this sensitive issue. Do you remember going to school dressed in your uniform during your school years? I bet some of you do. In Korea, students are usually required to wear a uniform when attending middle schools to high schools. But what if people in their 20s and foreign visitors take a stroll outside wearing a school uniform? These days, social media has been flooded with selfies of people like these, prompting more users jumping on the bandwagon. They say that it makes feel them they're doing something they always wanted to do but couldn't during their school years. Foreign visitors have also joined on the fad and appear to be enjoying themselves. Why not try it on yourself if you haven't already? Electronic cigarettes being sold in online stores for used goods are luring in teenager shoppers. Although it is technically illegal in South Korea to sell cigarettes and liquid nicotine online, but the law is not being enforced very well. Even if sellers are directly contacted by teenagers in online shopping malls, they often do not care that their customers are underage. With the shortage of government manpower to crack down on these illegal sales, many Korean teenagers are picking up, indulging in a potentially deadly habit. That's all for today, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'll see you next time. Bye bye! The nation will soon be soaking wet as a long-stalled monsoon front approaches the Korean peninsula.
Let's get more on the weather from our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Good evening, guys. The monsoon front is finally returning after 11 days. Now, it started to rain over in Jeju, and by Wednesday afternoon, the rain will expand to the entire nation, so you should have your umbrellas or raincoats ready. The East Coast will need to prepare for a heavy amount of rain. Gangwon province in particular will receive more than 200 millimeters of precipitation. And the central region, including the capital area, will also receive quite a large amount of rain, up to 60 millimeters of precipitation until Thursday. And the morning lows aren't too different from the previous days. Now, Seoul will wake up tomorrow to 20 degrees Celsius and a degree higher for Busan and Jeju. Now, due to the rainy weather, the mercury won't be able to climb up as much as it did the past week. Now, Seoul will rise up to 28 degrees Celsius, while Daegu and Gwangju is a lot lower, topping 25 and 24 degrees respectively. Tomorrow's monsoon rain will prolong until Thursday, with the sun expected to sizzle things up again on Friday. And up until the weekend, the daytime highs will hover moderately at around 30 degrees Celsius. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
News in Depth is next.